encourage you to do so. Up next, we have a great speaker. Man was here last year. We have him scheduled for tomorrow night. Let me just tell you, you may just hear something that that disturbs you. Who knows? He's a really nice guy. And it's going to be great if you'll just give me a few minutes and we'll bring him on out here. Jim Traficant.
Yeah.
Come on, give him a round of applause.
Thank you. I don't care what you say about me. Man, it's hot. Not a whole lot of people here, but this will go out on YouTube and get me indicted again.
Hope so.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be anywhere. See all the people sitting back there? Where's Big Paul?
Right here, brother.
Oh, here he is. Well, thank you for having me back. Some developments have happened past year. It seems that one of my last bills in Congress is starting to get some attention. And that dealt with the tax issue. Ladies and gentlemen, America will break up like the Soviet Union. It's just a matter of time unless there's some drastic changes. And there's only one root cause foundation of the economic mess we're in. Some people may be offended by what I say. I hope not. I was born and raised on the south side of Youngstown down by the steel mill. Very, very humble beginnings. The area of Youngstown where they dropped off the bodies when they killed somebody. But basically, people were happy. They no one locked their doors. Everybody worked hard. Didn't have much, but they seemed to struggle along. They were independent and self-actualized. Today in America, we've developed a powerful dependent minority. And when I say minority, I'm not talking about racial group. I'm talking about financial groups. Ladies and gentlemen, 47% of eligible taxpayers pay no income tax. So that means 53% of us pay the bill. And I know you're busy. Hey, what's for dinner, Martha? No one's really listening. But just look back at the Soviet Union. There was not one rifle shot, and you heard on the news that there's no more USSR. They were gone. It broke up. There wasn't one fist fight. Their government collapsed. Nobody thinks that can happen here. And you hear these politicians talking about the $1.3 trillion annual deficits. They are lying through their teeth. With the accounting practices of the United States government, they do not have to show the deficits in Social Security and Medicare. Ladies and gentlemen, the annual deficit in Social Security and Medicare is $3.7 million by itself. That's 5 trillion, not million, 5 trillion a year deficits. I want you to think about this now. We can never crawl out of this. Now, what everybody's telling you is, Jim, you don't have to worry, and don't be scaring people because we've got the printing press. We'll just go ahead and print some more dollars. There's only one problem with that, folks. We're a superpower, but we're not the only superpower now. And China and Russia, and I believe France have already convened a meeting to replace the dollar and use a universal currency for the purchase of oil. Just for oil to start. But let's look at what that means. That means the United States of America, if this happens, would not be able to buy oil with our dollars. And I guarantee you, if China's going to make this move, it's like Charles de Gaulle said years ago, you can never defeat America with a missile, you destroy America with the dollar. Ladies and gentlemen, if the dollar is removed as the world's reserve currency, America is going to break up into about 5 or 6 countries. I predict Alaska will be the first to have their own revenue stream. They're bigger than any European country landmass except Russia. We do not understand the picture. Germany is the size of Michigan. Japan is the size of California landmass. People are going to get tired sending their money to Washington and seeing that money go out and seeing that tax bill keep coming bigger and bigger. Now, if anybody read the newspapers on the last Supreme Court decision on the health care bill, you should get an education by now. The most conservative of the 9 judges, Judge Roberts, approved the tax for that purpose. He said it is not a penalty for people who choose not to purchase, it's a tax, and Congress is empowered and has a right to tax. How dumb are we? How much? How much more are you going to pay? And listen, I want you to go home and take a look, if you're a property owner, at your tax duplicate for your own personal property at home. If you've owned that property for more than 20 years, I guarantee to you your property tax is more than what your original mortgage note was with insurance and with the taxes. In a small community outside of Youngstown, a little city called Girard, a woman came to me. She said, Mr. Traficant, I have a 3/4 acre lot with 3-bedroom home, and I have it fixed nice. And I just got a tax duplicate for $6,100. Folks, that's $500 a month. She will rent her property from the county for $500 a month. And no one is lifting a voice, no one's saying a thing, and nobody gives a damn, quite frankly. So they say, all right, fine, we know all these things, Jim. And all these politicians, every year, they're going to reform tax policy, they're going to reform the IRS, they're going to tax the rich, and all the people are screaming, taxing the rich. And I sit back and I literally get totally disgusted. I can remember when Congress passed a luxury tax. I want you to listen to this. All the politicians are going home. We put it to the rich. We're going to tax those furs. We're going to tax those diamonds. We're going to tax those big boats, those yachts. You know what happened, folks? The people with money bought the boat overseas, bought the furs overseas, bought the diamonds overseas. Every boat builder on the East Coast went bankrupt. I lived in an old Egg Harbor, 37-foot wood, aft cabin motor yacht in Washington, D.C. on the Potomac, a wooden boat. I could listen to it rot. Egg Harbor went out of business. Now, we're going to tax the rich, make the tax pay their fair share. Let me tell you what's going to happen here. The taxers are going to say, goodbye, Charlie. Those rich people say, goodbye. We're leaving America. And they're going to take their money. They've already taken their factories. They've already taken the jobs. They're going to take the money next. And the problem is, and I come from as poor a family as anybody that's here. My father was a truck driver. And my father told me this. He said, Jimmy, I never worked for a poor guy. If someone doesn't make an investment, no one works. This country's not friendly to us. Our policies have chased us away. It's not these companies who are not patriotic. I hear these people on talk shows. They say, why aren't they more patriotic? Why don't they stay in America? Here's why. Because their competition is in China or Brazil or Mexico, and they'll go bankrupt. Because our Congress has passed laws that make it impossible to make a profit. And it's not a dirty word, folks. We've got to become friendly. To say, Jim, how do we do that? I was very pleased this last week to learn that Jesse Ventura has spoken out on behalf of a consumption tax. Now I want you to listen to me carefully, because my words have been misconstrued on this. The powers that be are scared to death of this. And they denigrated every opportunity they can with unfound facts and non-truths. One of the last bills that I sponsored, along with a Republican from Louisiana, Mr. Tozan, and a Republican from Colorado, Mr. Schaefer. And I was a Democrat all my life. It was known as the National Retail Sales Tax. Listen to it carefully. Number one, the bill called for a movement to strike from the Constitution the 16th Amendment, to repeal the 16th Amendment that supposedly, legally, supposedly allowed income taxes. You see, the founders never wanted an income tax. They didn't want to tax a man's labor. But our Congress went ahead, and when they started with the income tax, folks, just listen to this. It was only going to be on the rich. Well, that sounds good at home, doesn't it? Because most of us are not rich. Yay! Then the next thing you know, we all got taxed just like the rich. But they had more loopholes than we do, don't they? And quite frankly, we end up paying probably on a percentage more income tax than the average rich guy does.
Yeah, that's right.
First thing the bill does, it repeals the 16th Amendment. Income taxes are gone. Second thing it does is it removes the IRS. It abolishes them. They're not needed. 45 states already collect the sales tax. They will get a small percentage to collect the sales tax for the feds. The other 5 states, if they don't want to collect it, we'll collect it ourselves in those states. But here's what it does. No more tax on savings. No more tax on income. No more withholding. You get the full check. No more capital gains tax. No more corporation tax. No more tax on inheritance. No tax on investment. None. No more Social Security tax. No more tax on Medicare. It is a flat 25% national retail sales tax. And before you panic, Harvard did a study that says if you enact the national retail sales tax, 25% of the cost of the manufactured goods in America are because of that tax code. You throw that tax code out, and they predict that prices will drop, and this country will not even experience a 25% increase in prices. But there's one difference. Everybody pays the tax. Rich people make more money. They can't avoid it. They'll pay more tax. Drug dealers will pay a tax. Illegal immigrants will pay a tax. Hear me. People from Japan and Germany that come to Broadway or go to Las Vegas, they will be subsidizing and paying into our Social Security account. God Almighty. And let me tell you what. For the first time in history, and none of these politicians are talking about it, you haven't heard it yet in this election. And I want to ask you this. If you're in business, how can you buy as a business more than you sell and not go bankrupt? Think about that now. Because they say Traficant, he's no economist. Who's he kidding? Well, here's what I'm saying to all of these big economic mental masturbators. How can you stay in business if you buy more than you sell? Ladies and gentlemen, our trade deficit is now $750 billion a year. You go to the store and buy something, look and see where it's made. And why is that? Because we're in an economic mess here that does not reward business, does not reward industry, does not create jobs, does not pool money, and leaves our borders wide open. Now here's the bottom line with the Traficant tax. It'd be the first tax in American history, a border-adjusted tax that cannot be deemed protectionist under anybody's law or anybody's scrutiny. Here's why. Chevrolet made in Ohio. We export it overseas, we don't get many sales. The national studies and figures are 25% of the cost of that new cruise is because of the tax code, complying with the tax code. When you take that tax code out, now that car is not sold in America, it's going overseas, right? It is not taxed in America, it goes load free. But there's one major difference. That Toyota, that Korean car, those Chinese cars are going to be coming. They now carry a 25% tag in America just like everybody else. Ladies and gentlemen, they'll move their factories to America before they keep paying that shipping. And you'll see a balance in trade in behalf of America. Second of all, you'll see American companies coming home to a friendly America. You think they want to be in China? But someday they could wake up and China nationalizes their company and takes it over, says, sorry, Charlie, it's now a Chinese company. Oh, Traficant will tell you anything you want to hear. Yeah. I don't trust them. Those companies would like to stay in America, folks. They can't stay in America with the following scenario, and I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine that this railing here is the border between the United States and Mexico. Now, Jim Condit, who's going to be one of your speakers sitting here, he's technically in Mexico, if you will, and I'm in the United States of America. We both have businesses. We both make widgets. The American company has banking regulations, security regulations, environmental laws, minimum wage, pensions, health care, Social Security, unions, state laws, local ordinances. Jim Condit, making widgets in Mexico, has none. And so he don't have to pay $1.50 an hour on the border because the Mexicans are jumping back and forth on the border looking for jobs every month. Jim moves into central Mexico, gets a quiet community, builds a factory, gives them breakfast and lunch, and gives them 50 cents an hour. And Jim's company takes the widget market in the United States because he could send it across the border scot-free. Now, I've got to say it if you have anything to know about my background. Beam me up. Take me to the river, throw me in the water, if this makes any sense. Then everybody says, why are those companies leaving? They don't love America. They have no choice. Our policies have chased them out. Throw that damn income tax out. Get it off our back. No more forms. No more receipts. No more courts. No more trials. No more oaths to break. Get it out. Yeah. I'm serious. And if our country does that, America will become the greatest power ever. So solid, will become frightening. Now you'll notice that nobody from either of these two parties is advocating any type of significant innovative thought. What happened to the ideas in Washington? Are the powers so great they can't really do anything? How many more ways can you be taxed? Think about it. What America needs desperately is a political third party with merit that can challenge these jackasses. And I still don't see it happening. I see a group back there, but here's one of the problems. There's so many of these little splinter groups and none of them come together on anything. If they all come together, made an agreement, advance an agenda and advance the program, give the American people something to look at. I can recall with a little guy with big ears got in the race, Ross Perot. Now I've seen a lot more of the political dynamics involved with Ross Perot than many did. In fact, I was one of the convention speakers in his second term with Senator Max Cleland. He and I were the featured speakers along with Ross Perot. When Ross Perot ran as a third party, Reform Party candidate, he said, "I'm running because I want to defeat George Bush." Now keep in mind, Ross Perot was a Republican who's now running on a third party whose goal was to defeat the first President Bush. He dropped out of the race. He come back in with 4 weeks left and still won 20% of the popular vote in the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, in my district, I have 2 counties. He carried one of the counties over a sitting incumbent president and Bill Clinton. He carried it in Trumbull County. And basically, he was talking about the giant sucking sound going to Mexico, and when he was put on the stand there on Larry King with Al Gore, he really didn't have any substance to back it up. Let's be honest. In my opinion, Ross Perot was put in there to help elect Bill Clinton. No one helped elect Bill Clinton more than me. I don't know if many people may like Clinton. I'm not saying anything against him, but I just want to tell it like it is. Nobody helped Bill Clinton more than I did. I had his biggest political rally in his history of his life in a parking lot at a mall in Youngstown, Ohio, where there were over 25,000 people. He came in with Hillary on a bus, and Tipper and Al Gore, and Senator Bill Bradley. And Bradley said to me on the stage, he said, "This is the biggest political rally I've ever witnessed, Jim." And I was so popular. I was a leading vote getter in the entire Congress, all 435. One time got 93% of the vote with an opponent. Bill Clinton asked me to introduce him, which is rare. And I did. And I worked hard to elect him. And after he got elected, he just turned the country over. You wouldn't have had NAFTA and GATT unless you had Clinton. Democrats would have never supported it. He twisted the arm of about 50 Democrats to go along to Republicans. Now we have North American Free Trade Agreement, SHAFTA, and the GATT Agreement, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades. But more so than that, I was a congressman that made bitter enemies with Clinton and the Justice Department. Because very few people probably know this till this day. During his second campaign, Bill Clinton got a $10 million check from a general in the Red Chinese Army. I asked for an investigation. What the hell is a general in the Red Chinese Army doing giving $10 million to the Democrat National Committee to help elect Bill Clinton? In addition to NAFTA and GATT, Bill Clinton pushed through permanent most favored nation status for China. No one in this audience probably knows why Congress would debate trade status for China every year. Because there's an old law in Congress. Communist countries can't get most favored nation trade status, and China is a stone cold communist nation. So now what do we have? I hear people talking about this election. This will probably go out on YouTube. They say, where'd Obama come from?
He's a fraud.
How'd we get Obama?
The corrupt machine.
I can't prove this, but I'm going to have the testicles to tell you what I bet my life on. The powers that be behind the scenes wanted to elect Hillary Clinton. They kept Al Gore and John Kerry out of the race, who either one of them would have probably defeated Hillary in the primary. John Edwards all of a sudden had a big problem and he was out of the picture. Although it took 12 years for Arnold Schwarzenegger to get a problem, John Edwards developed overnight in that campaign. And all there was Hillary and Barack. And the powers that be behind the table thought, there's no way he's going to beat our girl. They didn't want Barack Obama. Powerful international sources, in fact led by Israel, booed him off the stage when he presented his platform to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. He was booed off the stage. When it looked like Hillary didn't have a shot and Barack Obama was going to be the nominee, the Clintons took Barack Obama to Israel and they made their deal. And there's where he come from. They could all come and give me their song and dance. But I've seen the other side of this one-eyed Jack. And here's what we have now. Your politicians are restrained. They don't know what the hell to do. They talked about a 10-year deal to remove $100 billion a year like it was the greatest achievement in the world. That amounts to $1 trillion. Ladies and gentlemen, the annual budget deficits are $5 trillion. And they were going to cut it $1 trillion over 10 years. Nobody, not one citizen is raising a voice around this country. Everybody's sitting back till you hear that news broadcast. Man, I hope to God it doesn't happen. But I hope there's others like Jesse Ventura to start taking a look at the national retail sales tax. It fully funds Medicare and Social Security, fully funds our government. It'll eliminate the trade deficit. It'll put us on track and it will stabilize the dollar. And if that's not done, America will break up like the Soviet Union without a shot. Without a shot. Now I want to talk briefly about this Supreme Court decision. Everybody's analyzing and distilling and digesting all the facets of it. It has now made the health care bill law and the controversial provision of what was called a penalty. You know, they have nice names for all these taxes. Fees, tolls. They're taxes. And where the White House said there's no tax in the bill, the Supreme Court approved the health care law on the strength that it was a tax. Think about this now. When I defeated the government in 1983, and I'm very proud of this, they couldn't live with it. The only American in history of the United States to defeat the United States Justice Department in a RICO trial, pro se without being an attorney, full jury verdict. They had a target on my back bigger than this building. They ultimately had to get rid of me, and they did. But people trusted me. I'm the congressman that brought home John Deminick from Israel. Here's a man, hear me, here's a man that's on death row sentenced, convicted to be executed, Chris. And I bring them home on a plane? How did I do that? I proved with documents that come from the Justice Department, not only that he wasn't Ivan, but who Ivan was, and they suborned the perjury of it. And let me tell you how powerful it is. Congress wouldn't hold a hearing. It's too sensitive, Jim. Sixth Circuit Court wouldn't accept the evidence. I said on the House floor, when does sensitivity waive the Bill of Rights around here? You have an innocent man. So I sent all the evidence I had over to the Israeli Supreme Court. And ladies and gentlemen, when I arrived in Israel, it was like a rock star. Everybody knew who I was. Here he comes. Here's the big mouth. Here's the Nazi lover. You should see what the newspapers called me. Well, Brian Gumbel from Today Show called me and did an interview. He said, Congressman, what's the status over there? I says, Brian, if they execute this man on the strength of the evidence I've submitted to the Israeli Supreme Court, Israel will lose $25 billion a year from the American taxpayers. He said, what are you talking about? I'm on satellite now. He said, Jim, they only get $3 billion. I said, only $3 billion. Do you realize, Brian, that $3 billion is $5,000 for every man, woman, and child in Israel? But I said, that's only the foreign aid bill. No one's looking at loans. Loans converted to grants. Grants, economic assistance, military assistance, trade compact. I'm saying that the Israeli citizens get $40,000, each and every one of them, from my taxpayers in my districts who work 40 hours a week and don't take that kind of money home. Oh, thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Congressman. That night, my hotel room in Jerusalem, I got a phone call from the Israeli Supreme Court. Now, I want you to listen to this. Mr. Deminick will be delivered to you tomorrow night at Tel Aviv Airport. And I brought him home. When I brought him home, I called a press conference in New York while there are all those hawks and buzzards and predators scrambled down for the press conference. I got him in a little 2-engine plane and took him to Ohio. Ladies and gentlemen, as soon as they put me in prison, they put him on trial in Germany. That man was no more a Nazi than you or anyone you know. But they had to correct the record. But you know what really bothered me? When I landed in New York with John Deminick, the Sixth Circuit Court of Cincinnati gave a press release that said, a tragic but honest mistake by the government. And none of those bastards were charged with a crime. None of them. About the Supreme Court, I guess I gotta go. Big Paul is out of here, preparing business. I would get things, like the Pan Am 103 report, I got that. I released it. They lied to us. That one Libyan he was acquitted, and the other Libyan they let out of prison. They knew they weren't the real culprits. The report I got said exactly what happened to Pan Am 103. Connie Chung called and she said, I'm going to do an interview. I'm going to do it. She says, I believe this report, Mr. Traficant. I said, I checked it out, elements of it, and I believe it's true as well. I said, but you better be careful. You're going to be stepping on some big toes. She said, don't be foolish. Ladies and gentlemen, she was sitting in for Dan Rather for the evening news on the weekends. She was the most popular news personality in America as a minority. 2 weeks after she did this special, she was never on TV again. The report was quite clear. America had shot down an Iranian Airbus with 365 innocent people, and Iran hired 2 international terrorists to develop an international plot to strike back at America. It turned out to be Pan Am 103, which also happened to be the heroin run for one of the key CIA operatives out of Beirut by the name of Mansour al-Qassar. And our government had to cover it up. The American people knew that they were covering up turning their back on massive heroin shipments. And the word in the CIA was he was a valuable asset. He had gotten 3 Iranian hostages released, and he was working with CIA Beirut to get our 8 hostages released. Lying bastards. I want you to think about this. Go to any street corner, you could find heroin as easy as you could find an aspirin. And none of it is made here. Now you figure it out for yourself. But now, before I close, and I'd said I was going to tell Jim Condit about this, and I guess Jim's coming up later this evening, Cincinnati, Ohio, and brilliant man. Listen to what he says. Well, Jim, this one, I guess Clinton was in office, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 months, maybe more. I get a packet that comes, like a manila folder, taped up and everything, for Traficant's eyes only. And I got a lot of those things, and they brought it into me, and when I got it, I opened it up, it was a cassette. Nothing written on it, it was a tape. Nothing. I didn't think much about it, and one night, waiting for a vote, I put this thing in. And it was a talk show host in a talk show in New York City, interviewing a board member of American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. It started out and says, I'll bet you're tickled with Clinton. They said, oh yeah, we've been with Bill and Hillary all the way up from Arkansas and everything. The other thing I can recall, because you see, after they indicted me this last time, all my stuff just happened to come up missing.
Imagine that.
But here's a couple of things I remember vivid. The next line of questioning was, we couldn't understand your selection of Gore for vice president. You know, you were from the South. We thought you'd pick someone from the West or the Midwest or the East to balance the ticket. They said, no, we have so many friends up there in the media. We wanted to make sure we carried that Bible Belt down south. Next line of questioning, I guess you'll be concerned about who they named to Secretary of State position. He said, well, it'd be nice, but it's not our main concern. We have so many people in the State Department. He said, but what we want that Supreme Court position. Go ahead and indict me, because the appointment of Bill Clinton was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Clinton had a second appointment. He nominated a second Jewish American. I have nothing against Jews. People get mad at me. Call me anti-Semitic. I'm not. The facts are, he nominated a second Jewish jurist who just so happened to have on his payroll and his home domestic staff an illegal immigrant that he was paying cash under the table. Now, Jim would have been indicted for that. But he had to be excused. Where do these Supreme Court judges come from? Who's looking at the makeup of our courts? What happens when these prosecutors suborn perjury and destroy lives and get away with it? A Justice Department report their own self this year come out and said at least 12% of American prisoners are totally innocent.
Prison industrial complex.
Folks, that's over 250,000 Americans. Now, I brought John Deminick home from death row. You try and get someone out of these prisons. Now, when I went to prison, I was offered a deal, have my sentence commuted or pardoned if I said I was guilty. And I sent the message back to the President of the United States and told him to shove the pardon up his ass sideways.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing 7.5 years. They put me in tough prisons. I didn't do any country clubs. Yeah, they also did that. When I was shipped to Raybrook, Jim, the bus was loaded and there was only one guy with the chains in a black box, Jim Traficant. I was such a threat. And then one policeman said, his guard says, Traficant, you got to go to the restroom? I said, no, I'll just shit right here if I have to. I became very hard, folks, excuse my mouth. I couldn't stand myself. But I wouldn't have survived it. It's time for us to take the country back. We need a third political party. They got to stop this business, bickering among themselves. They all got to have a national convention of all the third parties and sit down and develop a coalition and get a platform. One believes in this, one believes in that. Because I don't believe in this, I'm not going to be with you. Stop it. There is one main thing here. How do we finance America? Our system is broke. It doesn't work. It's punitive. It creates dependency. Throw it the hell out. That should be the program. All these other things, we work on them. Get the government off our back. What do you need a Department of Education for? Yeah. Congress could set some basic standards, but each state has a department. Let the states run it. The states created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states. What do we need an Environmental Protection Agency for? Think about it. A small group for international problems, set policy, the states run it. Think about all of the programs in Washington we don't need. Now you have the Office of Homeland Security, right? This isn't going to make me many friends. When you go through those screeners that are so controversial, one of the big owners in that is the former head of Homeland Security himself, Michael Chertoff. Michael Chertoff, the director of Homeland Security, owns most of those screens. In closing, as some people ask me about one of my little speeches that I made years ago. I do have a book out. Some people ask me about it. My publisher will be here tomorrow. If anybody's interested. It's called America's Last Minute Man. It's a compilation of my little one-minute speeches. Many of them made more national TV than any other member of Congress. Many of them were very funny, but they all had a message. The book, David, is broken down into 25 chapters on issues from trade to foreign affairs to budget to IRS, tax policy, war, defense spending. You'll find it very interesting. And all it is now, listen, is all these speeches, and then at the end of each chapter, a summary of why I made those speeches. But there was one speech that they called the Traficant Gettysburg Address. It was so widespread, it was faxed all over the world. I had people I'd gone to school with that lived overseas said they read about or heard about it overseas. It got to the point where I'd speak on these issues when each day before Congress opened you had an opportunity to make little one-minute speeches. So keep in mind, if you have a bill on the floor that has 60 minutes of debate, 30 minutes for Republicans, 30 minutes for Democrats, and there's 435 members. And all the big shots take the time. You don't get a chance to speak on it. So I started to speak before the session on these issues, and I started making national news with my statements. Because most of the people stand up and say, they got their hands in their lapel like Jack Kennedy with their fly open, and they say, I rise in support of. And I'd say, this bill is a turkey, shoot it down. Didn't take me long. Well, my staff started getting information. People would send me topics. And they'd come to me and they said, Jim, you're not going to believe it. That was that. I said, everybody wants to know when you're going to speak about Lorena Bobbitt. I said, are you curious? Are you serious? He says, yeah, honest to God, I'm getting calls, man. He said, I can't believe you haven't spoken about it. So I was in Congress 9 terms. I never made a limerick, like a little rhyme. But I woke up one morning with an idea, and I jotted it to pencil and pen. And I went on the House floor, and so help me God, when I started that speech, you could hear a pin drop. And people started coming out of the cloakroom, and the gallery was up on their seats. And here's what I said. There once was a woman from Manassas, And they knew right then who got tired of all the hassles. Claiming she had been raped by her spouse in her very own house. Went to the kitchen to get a knife, fully prepared to take her husband's life. But realizing that such a crime was much so heinous, decided instead to cut off his painless. Now I said painless so some holier than thou don't stand up and object. The reporter of record was so mesmerized by the topic, she wrote penis in the congressional record, and I let it stand. So it reads, decided instead to cut off his penis. I said, now Mr. Speaker, I don't know if this man plays the piano, but from here on out he'll sing like a soprano. But if he really, really did rape his wife, maybe, just maybe, he deserved that knife. I then said, like everybody says, I yield back the balance of time. I said, I yield back any outstanding particles still missing. That place went absolutely bonkers. They didn't know how to take it. But they were that buzzing, and I was in prison, listen, 3 years, and they ran that speech in Washington. And the only other one take about 30 seconds. During a debate on foreign aid, I called the members of the House of Representatives a bunch of political prostitutes. They jumped up like 100 wounded TV evangelists, demanding that my caustic remarks be stricken from the record for all eternity. A dear old friend of mine, who is a chairman from North Carolina, he says, Jim, you get so much for your area out of here, because I held him up, really. He said, maybe you should apologize this time. So I gave it some serious constipation. And I went to the mic and I said, Mr. Chairman, to all the members of the House of Representatives who were in fact offended by my remarks in referring to you as a bunch of political prostitutes, I apologize. I said, and Mr. Speaker, to all the members of the House of Representatives who were in fact not offended by my remarks in referring to you as a bunch of political prostitutes, I commend. And I walked out. And they said, what the hell did that jackass say? I can't stand them. They were going on. What did he mean by all that? So I get outside. There's this little TV stringer, or radio stringer, Jim. And they have this mic under my face, and they said, tell us what you really feel. Uh-oh. I didn't know this would play every 10 minutes in the Washington region, make all the national networks, and start the Johnny Carson show out. I said, I want to apologize to all the hookers in America for having associated them with the United States House of Representatives, and it felt so damn good. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. I ain't playing with them.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Can't say it enough.
I don't care what you say.